I'm going to talk today about some of the things that I see in rehabilitation, and I think this might be a little bit of a ongoing series. I'll elaborate on some of this down the road, but there's some interesting things that I see in rehabilitation and physical therapy, chiropractic, and even in parts of the strength and conditioning world. And there's this belief that if an exercise is more difficult for someone to do, it must automatically be better. And unfortunately, for these folks, this isn't true. And many times they're not getting what they're intending to get out of the exercise that they're selecting for the person. So, in fact, making an exercise more difficult oftentimes makes it a less effective choice. And I'll get into that as we go on. So, I've been a strength coach and a clinician for about 20 years now, and I've seen it all in the fitness industry and the rehabilitation world. And along the way, both of those industries have started to become increasingly creative with how they do things. More bands, more balance pads. Let's break out the Bosu ball. Let's blow up some balloons. Medicine balls, 3 exercises that they're combined into one thing. And every year I will sit back and I ask myself the same question when I see these things. What adaptation is this person actually trying to create with the exercise that they've selected for the individual? And the thing to always remember is the body doesn't adapt to creativity. The body is adapting to the stress that's applied to it. So every exercise you choose is going to have a limiting factor. And the question is whether or not the limiting factor is the one that you're intending the exercise to have for the person. So let's say I'm trying to help somebody strengthen their quadriceps with a split squat variation. And I'm looking for the quadriceps to be the reason that the set is going to end, that's going to be the bottleneck. I'm not looking for your balance to be our limiting factor. I'm not looking for your coordination to be the limiting factor. I'm not going to put some ball for you to squeeze between your knee and stand on a foam pad and add a resistance band in some direction. And what ends up happening is people started to confuse making exercise more complicated with making it more effective. And these are not the same thing. Difficulty can come in a lot of forms when you're working with somebody. An exercise can be difficult because they don't have the strength to perform it, or they might not have the current available range of motion. Maybe their balance isn't what it could be, or their coordination. Maybe they're afraid of moving through the exercise. Maybe there's some pain in the way, some cognitive load that's a problem, but just because you're making something harder doesn't guarantee that you're improving the quality of stress on the person or on the tissues that you're trying to make change. So, not gonna throw stones if I haven't been there. Early on in my career, I did spend a lot more time experimenting with some more creative ways to work with people, we'll say. Pretty much everyone will go through that phase at some point. But over time, I started running into the same problems with the patients I was working with. They would start to they start to lose confidence in what they were doing, especially if they were doing it on their own. If I was asking them to do it away from the clinic. And eventually there wasn't obvious ways to progress the exercises. And eventually these exercises turn into a dead end for the person and for me with what I'm trying to do. And then I would turn around and say, oh, all these simple exercises continue to make progress in the long run. My squatting, my split squatting, different carry variations, rowing variations, pressing variations, different variations of deadlifting, just walking. And there's no magical thing about any of these exercises. They're magical because they're all scalable. And we can increase the loading, we can change the ranges of motion, we can increase the speed at which somebody's doing it, we can easily manipulate the volume they're going to use, and you always know where you're going. Like we can always have a vision of where we're going to go next with these exercises. So good rehabilitation shouldn't just end with some dead end with some strange exercise you invented. The exercises should create a clear pathway to where you're headed. And this is going to bring me to something that's been going on about the last year of my work. I've had the privilege of working with several very highly motivated people that are recovering from pretty severe strokes. And a lot of what I've done working with them has started to change a little bit about how I've thought about exercise prescription rehabilitation. Because when somebody has a stroke and they're able to get to a place where they can start doing more difficult rehabilitation, every step that I'm having that person take without using their cane or walker is essentially a 1 rep max, like every single step. And it has nothing to do with the weight they're lifting, but it's the max. I'm putting maximum effort on their entire system, on their strength, their balance, their coordination, their attention, their confidence, their problem solving, their fear, every single thing. I am maximally stressing every step that they take. And that's just walking. We're not talking about any other exercise I choose. So this experience is starting to teach me something that I'm going to continue to strive for and look at the rest of my career, however long it goes on. And the idea is that every constraint has a cost to it. Every extra piece of instruction, every little piece of equipment I add, every additional challenge that I ask of somebody is asking the nervous system to spend a little bit more of its limited capacity. And we need constraints in training and in rehab. So the constraints aren't bad, but the constraints need to be intentional with how they're applied. So when you're working with these patients that have had a stroke, there's questions I'm constantly asking them as we're working together. How did that feel? What problem were you just trying to solve with that exercise I presented you with? Why did you hesitate all of a sudden in the middle of it? What changed between this repetition and that repetition that allowed you to break through that hesitation? And I'm not sitting there trying to make them memorize more stuff and learn more cues. I'm trying to help them understand how they're arriving at the decisions they're making about their own movement. And this is, to me, good quality rehabilitation. So I would say I've started to change how I think about exercise and its application over the last 20 years. I've quit asking, how can I make this exercise harder? I've started to ask, what's the smallest intervention that I can make that's going to reliably move this person forward? And I call this precision. That's what it is. We're developing precision with our prescription. So the goal isn't to impress somebody with some new exercise that they've never seen before. Who cares? The goal is to help them become stronger and more confident and eventually more independent from me and in their normal life, because the best exercises aren't the ones that appear to be the most clever. The best exercises are the ones that the person can understand, the one that they believe in, and the ones that they will go and actually do when they're not with you. It's an exercise that's going to have a clear progression from where we're at now to 6 months from now to 6 years from now to etc. So if there's one idea that I hope you're going to take from this video, it's this: do not confuse complexity with effectiveness. Don't confuse difficulty with creating adaptation. And make sure when you're in these situations, working with people, ask 3 quick questions. What is going to be, or what adaptation am I trying to create right now? What should be the limiting factor? And does this exercise make the tissues of the systems that I want to the limiting factor? And if those answers are not lining up, then we need to start looking at a different exercise. Because rehabilitation and training, they're not about finding the perfect exercise. They're about applying the right amount of stress with some precision, consistency, and purpose. And that is how we get quality adaptations. And that is how your patients start to become independent. And ultimately, that is how we start to make our people better.